Think beyond fried calamari and instead make this stuffed calamari with a rich tomato sauce baked in the oven. Welcome to Actually Italian. I'm Sal. I've been living in Italy for years now. I'm really excited to teach you some authentic recipes so you can cook like an Italian yourself. Stuffed calamari is popular all over Italy. It's just the preparation is going to be different depending on where you go. You could get it grilled, or in this case, you could have them stuffed and then baked in the oven with a tomato sauce like they do in Sicily. And that's how we're going to make them today, so let's get started. Let's start by going over the calamari. I got mine fresh from a fishmonger. I had them clean it up for me, and this is the result. So what we have then are the tentacles, which are going to get chopped up and then put into the stuffing. I've also got the little flaps, or whatever you want to call them, that you might not get if you get frozen or even from your fishmonger. They might already be cleaned off. These also are going to go inside. Then there's the body. If you get these frozen, this is generally what they're going to look like. And this is obviously the part that's going to get stuffed. Again, these have already been cleaned. If you have a fishmonger that hasn't already cleaned these, then just ask them to clean them so you don't have to do it yourself. They'll be more than happy to do that. So now I'm going to start with the prep on the calamari itself. The first thing we're going to do is give these tentacles a really fine chopping. This is going to go into the stuffing, so it's important that the pieces are very, very small, almost ground. If you don't have tentacles, that's fine. You can definitely leave the tentacle part out of it. I have a bowl with the breadcrumbs here ready to go. The breadcrumbs I make myself. I always have some leftover bread. We let it get stale and kind of grate it up. Any breadcrumb that you want to use is fine. Panko works great. The only thing I recommend is that you don't get seasoned breadcrumbs. You want to be in control of the seasoning. At this point, we'll add the tentacles into the breadcrumbs. We'll add a beaten egg. I'm going to grate some garlic into this. I'm going to do it at this point because I want it to incorporate into the egg so it spreads evenly. You could slice your garlic if you want, but I think it's better to have it grated like this. That way you don't bite into a chunk of garlic. Just going to give this a quick little mix here. And we're about to break a cardinal sin of Italian cuisine. You don't mix seafood with cheese. Now this is actually traditional. I'm not coming up with this on my own. They do put grated cheese in their stuffing for stuffed calamari. In this case, I'm adding a mixture of pecorino, which is a sheep's milk cheese, a little bit sharp and salty, and some parmesan. So it's kind of mellows it out a little bit. I'm also adding some capers here. These are salted capers. I just gave them a rinse to get the salt off of them. You could use the pickled kind. Those work really well in this too. Again, we'll give it a quick little mix, add some salt, and we just want it to sit for a minute or two before we get stuffing, so that way it has a chance to kind of absorb all that egg. Everything's mixed and nicely homogeneous, so it's ready to stuff the calamari. Filling it, it's a little bit fussy, but it's not difficult. You just need a small spoon, one that's going to fit basically into the opening. And we're just going to take a spoon at a time, kind of plop it in there. We want to get this all the way in so it goes all the way down. You can actually kind of squeeze it down so it's down to the end. Leave about a quarter of it not filled by the opening. These are going to shrink, and if we fill it too much, all the filling is going to come out. We've got it filled, so now we have to close that hole up. We're just going to take a toothpick, poke it through like this, and then kind of fold it over and have it come through like that. So it makes like a nice closure there. And that's it. And we're just going to finish up the rest of them. Calamari's filled, it's ready to go. I did have a couple of extra tentacles that I'm just going to put in with the sauce. Now we're just going to assemble all the calamari in the pan with the sauce. I want to start by putting a layer of sauce down in the bottom of the pan here. In this case, I'm using these cherry tomatoes, a whole peeled cherry tomatoes. You can use whatever tomato you like. If you have the whole peeled San Marzano, you can just put some of those in, kind of give them a rough chop. Or if you have some sauce already cooked, that works too. Just make sure that it's good tomatoes, it's a good sauce, because that's going to make all the difference. Now I'm going to add some olives to this. Use good olives again. I'm also going to salt this because this sauce is raw. So I want to add some salt to give it some flavor. Not too much because the olives are salty, but since this is going to cook for about a half an hour, we don't need to cook it ahead of time. For the assembly, we're just going to lay them one by one on top of that sauce. Before we cover this up now, I want to put some passata over the top of these. We don't have to have these completely covered because this is all going to kind of steam away. Once the liquid starts coming out of the calamari, it's going to create even more of a sauce. I'll add some salt to the top. We do have some salty elements in the stuffing, but the calamari itself is not going to add any salt. We just want to cover these up before we put it in the oven. We're going to put this in a preheated oven, heated to about 350 degrees. The key thing to remember is calamari, you either cook it for 30 seconds or you cook it for 30 minutes. In between, and it's going to be like rubber bands. So this needs to cook for 30 minutes to make sure it's nice and tender. I have a link to the printable recipe in the description box below, so you'll get all the measurements and the times and things like that. It's been a half an hour, so I'm going to check on the calamari now. They're not quite done. I used a glass baking dish that takes a little while to heat up, so a half an hour wasn't going to be enough time. 15 minutes later, I took a knife and I just poked it. It went through very easily with very little resistance. The total cooking time was 45 minutes. It's important to keep that in mind, depending on the dish that you're using, that your cooking time might vary. So it's just important to check after half an hour and see where you're at. Now that it's done, we're ready to plate it up. This is basically two courses. The first course is going to be some pasta, and they'll toss this sauce here with the pasta. So then when they're finished with that, that's when they'll serve up the rest of the calamari, the stuffed calamari. They'll serve it with a little salad, maybe some sautéed greens, and there's your lunch. So those are the two courses. That's how Italians generally eat. I'm going to plate it up now and I'll give you a taste test, let you know what I think. It's definitely best with a little bit of the sauce on it. There is a lot going on in this plate, and that's why I love Sicilian cuisine so much, because it's just so packed with so many flavors. The calamari is super tender because it cooked long enough. We've got the salty bite of the capers, that brightness of the mint, and then the sweetness of the tomatoes, just everything working together. It's really amazing. I love fried calamari, but I would choose this over fried calamari every time. The only thing left to do is a little bit of scarpetta, just dipping my bread in the sauce. I'm going to do that, and I'll see you in the next video.